$5 million. That's how much my family laughed away at Christmas dinner. They tore up checks worth millions right in front of my grandmother's face, all while I sat frozen, watching them mock the woman who raised us. My name is Marissa Calder, and this is how I became the sole heir to a fortune nobody knew existed. From the outside, we were that picture-perfect family, the ones who took those matching pajama photos every December and sent out holiday newsletters bragging about Dad's real estate empire and my sister's accomplishments. Mom coordinated our outfits down to the accessories. People envied us, if they only knew the truth. My father, Gregory, loved exactly two things: his business reputation and the sound of his own voice. Every conversation somehow circled back to his success or someone else's failure. Even at home, he performed like he was still closing deals. Appearances matter more than reality, Marissa. He'd remind me whenever I questioned our family's fakeness. My twin sisters, Harper and Delaney, were carbon copies of him, obsessed with status, quick to judge, and masters at making me feel like the family disappointment. Then there was my mother, Nadine. She spent 30 years playing peacekeeper until the light behind her eyes dimmed to nothing. She'd given up fighting long before I was old enough to understand why. The only real person in my life was Grandma Rosalind. She lived in the same modest house for 40 years, drove a car older than me, clipped coupons from the Sunday paper, wore comfortable shoes instead of designer labels, and she was the only one who actually listened when I spoke. No one suspected she was sitting on a fortune, not even me. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by people who should have protected you? People whose blood you share? If you have, you'll feel this story in your bones. Hit subscribe now. Not because it helps me, but because stories like this remind us that sometimes being underestimated is your greatest advantage. Grandma got sick in November. Nothing dramatic. No hospital stays or emergency calls. Just a gradual slowing down that only someone paying attention would notice. While my parents planned their annual New Year's gala and my sisters documented their shopping sprees, I drove to Grandma's house every weekend. Sometimes I'd bring her favorite lemon cookies from the bakery downtown. Other times we'd just sit together watching old movies she loved. "You're the only one who visits anymore," she said one Saturday, adjusting the knitted blanket across her lap. Her hands looked more fragile than before, blue veins visible beneath tissue paper skin. "They're busy, Grandma," I said, though we both knew that wasn't the real reason. She smiled that knowing smile. "Too busy for family, but never too busy for money." The house was exactly as it had been since Grandpa died 12 years earlier. Modest furniture, family photos in simple frames, everything clean, but nothing fancy. Dad always complained about the outdated everything whenever he was forced to visit. One evening in early December, as a light snow fell outside her living room window, Grandma said something that stuck with me. "Marissa, have you noticed how people show who they truly are when they think there's something to gain?" I looked up from the tea I was pouring. "What do you mean?" Her eyes, still sharp despite her weakening body, held mine. "Pay attention to how people treat you when they think you have nothing, and how quickly that changes when they believe you have everything." She started making strange preparations after that conversation, organizing papers late into the night, taking calls from someone she only referred to as my advisor, making me promise to come to her house for Christmas Day, something that had never happened before. "Everyone will come to my house this year," she announced during a rare family dinner. "One last time." The way she said those final words sent a chill through me, like she knew something none of us did. Dad complained immediately. Mom worried about the small space. My sisters rolled their eyes and whispered about being bored to death. But they agreed to come when Grandma mentioned she had a special surprise for everyone. I didn't know it then, but Grandma was setting a trap that would expose our family's true colors and change my life forever. Christmas at our house always followed the same script. Mom decorated 3 perfect trees in different themes. Dad invited business associates to show off. My sisters competed for most expensive gifts, and I wondered what any of it had to do with family. But this year, Grandma changed everything with 8 words. "Everyone will come to my house this Christmas Day." Dad tried to argue. "Mom, be reasonable. Your place is too small for everyone." "My house is big enough for people who want to be there," she replied, her voice surprisingly firm. Mom attempted her peacekeeping routine. "Rosalind, we can certainly host you at our place. The stairs at your home might be difficult." Grandma cut her off. "I have a surprise for everyone, one I can only give at my house." The mention of a surprise changed the atmosphere instantly. I watched my family's faces shift from annoyance to curiosity. "What kind of surprise?" Harper asked, suddenly interested. Grandma just smiled. "You'll have to come and see." The morning of December 25th arrived with fresh snow. Dad complained about driving his luxury SUV on these neglected back roads. Mom packed extra food, convinced Grandma couldn't possibly prepare enough. The twins spent the entire drive complaining about missing their friend's holiday party. I drove separately, arriving early to help Grandma. When I walked in, something felt different. The house looked the same: modest furniture, family photos, that ancient television, but Grandma seemed almost mischievous. She'd set the dining table with her best dishes, the ones she only used for special occasions. A stack of pristine cream-colored envelopes sat on her sideboard. "Is everything okay?" I asked, helping her arrange poinsettias. "Better than okay," she said. "Today, everyone shows who they truly are." She refused to explain further, changing the subject whenever I asked about the envelopes. By noon, the house filled with forced cheer and fake compliments. My family arrived bearing expensive gifts they knew Grandma would never use: designer scarves, electronic gadgets she couldn't operate, luxury bath products for a woman who used plain soap. Nobody noticed that beneath Grandma's frailty was a sharp mind, with a plan years in the making. Dinner was excruciating. Dad dominated conversation with stories about his latest business deals. The twins checked their phones under the table. Mom kept apologizing for the small space, the simple food, everything. Grandma watched it all with quiet attention, barely touching her food. "Did you make this gravy from scratch, Grandma?" I asked, trying to include her in her own dinner. "Yes, dear, my mother's recipe," she smiled. "Honestly, you could just use the jarred stuff," Delaney said, barely looking up. No one can tell the difference anyway. Every plate clink, every forced laugh, every backhanded compliment made me more uncomfortable. Everyone was waiting for this surprise Grandma had promised. After dessert, Grandma disappeared into her bedroom. When she returned, she carried those cream envelopes I'd noticed earlier, now arranged in a perfect stack. The room fell silent. "I've been thinking about my legacy," Grandma began, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "About what I'll leave behind when I'm gone." Dad straightened up, suddenly attentive. The twins put down their phones. "Each of you gets an envelope," Grandma continued. "Gregory, Nadine, Harper, Delaney, my nephew Craig, his children Emma and Jason, and Marissa." She handed them out one by one, saving mine for last. When our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. A warning? A promise? "Open them together," she instructed. Paper tore, then silence. Inside each envelope was a check, a real bank check, for $5 million. My hands trembled as I stared at the numbers, the signature, the bank logo. This couldn't be real. Dad broke the silence with a sharp laugh. "Mom, what kind of joke is this? 5 million?" Uncle Craig snorted. "Good one, Rosalind." Harper and Delaney giggled, then deliberately tore their checks in half, dropping the pieces into their water glasses. "The senile joke of the century," Delaney announced. Mom looked confused but said nothing, carefully placing her check on the table. Dad's voice turned patronizing. "Mother, no bank would ever cash this. You don't have this kind of money." My family laughed at Grandma's delusion, tears streaming down their faces from amusement. I just stared at my check, saying nothing. Grandma watched them all with those knowing eyes, unfazed by their mockery. Then she turned to me. Just me. "Marissa, do you think it's fake? Marissa, do you think it's fake?" Grandma's question hung in the air. The laughter around the table died down as everyone turned to look at me. I held the check, feeling its weight, the textured paper, the watermark visible when I tilted it toward the light. "I don't know," I said quietly, looking directly at my grandmother. "But I don't think you would lie to me," Dad scoffed. "For God's sake, don't encourage her delusions." "She shops at thrift stores," Harper exclaimed, gesturing at Grandma's modest living room. "Look around. Does this look like the home of someone with millions?" Delaney picked up the torn pieces of her check from her water glass and dangled them over her plate. "Maybe we should get her evaluated. This isn't normal behavior." Uncle Craig leaned forward. "Rosalind, where exactly do you think this money is coming from? Your pension?" Each comment felt like a slap. I watched Grandma's face, expecting to see hurt, but instead found something else, a calm watchfulness, as if she were taking mental notes. "The woman drives a 20-year-old car," Dad continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "She reuses tea bags. She hasn't taken a vacation in a decade. And suddenly she's handing out $40 million like party favors?" My cousins Emma and Jason had already wadded up their checks and were tossing them back and forth across the table like paper footballs. Through it all, Grandma remained composed. She simply watched, noting who laughed hardest, who joined in the mockery, who stayed silent. Mom at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, staring down at her untouched pie. After dessert, while everyone gathered their coats, still making jokes about Grandma's millions, I helped her clear the table. In the kitchen, away from the others, she gently touched my arm. "What will you do with your check?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. I hesitated. "I'm not sure. What should I do?" Her eyes held mine. "Trust your instincts, Marissa. You've always had good ones." Before I could ask more, Dad called from the living room. "Marissa, we're leaving. Say goodbye to your grandmother." As I hugged her goodbye, Grandma whispered, "Remember who laughed today." You know what hurts the most? Not what they did to her, but that I still craved their approval after witnessing their cruelty. If you've ever given people too many chances, you already understand this pain. Don't just scroll. Subscribe. Join those who've been through it too, because you deserve stories that make you feel seen. I barely slept that night. The check sat on my nightstand, those 8 figures glowing in the dark. $5,000, of course. Was it possible? Could Grandma really have that kind of money? And if she did, why had she lived so modestly all these years? By morning, I'd made my decision. While my family slept off their Christmas wine, I got dressed, grabbed the check, and drove to the nearest branch of Grandma's bank. My hands shook as I filled out the deposit slip. My checking account held exactly $213.47, barely enough to cover next month's car payment. What if the teller laughed at me too? The lobby was nearly empty, just a security guard and two tellers chatting about their holiday. "Good morning," the teller said brightly. "How can I help you today?" I slid the check across the counter. "I'd like to deposit this, please." Her eyes widened slightly as she registered the amount. She examined the check carefully, turning it over, holding it up to the light. "One moment," she said, disappearing into a back office. My heart pounded. 5 minutes passed. 10. I considered leaving, convinced I'd made a fool of myself. Finally, the teller returned with an older woman in a blazer with a name tag that read, "Branch Manager." "Ms. Calder?" the manager asked. "I'm Mrs. Richardson. Would you mind stepping into my office?" This was it. They were going to tell me the check was fake, maybe even call the police. In her office, Mrs. Richardson studied the check again, typing something into her computer. "This is an unusual amount," she said finally, looking up at me. I nodded, unable to speak. "I need to verify the funds are available in the issuing account," she continued, "and there will be a standard hold period." More typing, a phone call. I sat frozen, waiting for the other shoe to drop. After what felt like hours, Mrs. Richardson smiled. "Well, Miss Calder, I've confirmed with our verification department. The funds are legitimate and available in the issuing account. The check will clear within 5 to 7 business days, as is standard with deposits of this size." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "So, it's real?" "Yes, Miss Calder. The deposit has been accepted." I thanked her, legs wobbling as I walked to my car. Inside, I gripped the steering wheel and began to cry, not just from shock or relief, but understanding. Grandma had been telling the truth, and my family had laughed in her face. 3 days later, Grandma passed away in her sleep, and the money hit my account the very next morning. The call came at 6:17 a.m. on December 28th. Mom's voice, unusually small on the phone. "Grandma's gone, Marissa. The neighbor found her." My world collapsed. Not Grandma, not now. I drove to her house in a fog, barely registering the winter morning. Yellow police tape marked the front door, standard procedure when someone dies alone. Inside, Grandma's body had already been taken away, but her presence lingered everywhere. Her reading glasses on the side table. The impression of her body still visible on her favorite recliner. A half-finished cup of tea, cold on the coffee table. She'd died peacefully, they said. In her sleep. No pain. Small comforts that did nothing to fill the gaping hole in my chest. Within hours, my family descended. Dad immediately started opening drawers and closets, looking for a will, for bank statements, for anything of value. "She must have hidden it somewhere," he muttered, rifling through her desk. "The money?" No one jokes about millions without a reason. My sisters argued over her jewelry, costume pieces worth pennies, but suddenly precious now that they might be their only inheritance. Uncle Craig claimed her car, because it's the practical thing to do, though he drove a Mercedes and Grandma's ancient Toyota probably wouldn't fetch $2,000. Through my grief, I watched them tear apart her sanctuary, fighting over scraps like vultures. Nobody noticed me sitting quietly in the kitchen, clutching my phone, until it buzzed in my hand. A notification from my banking app. Deposit of $5,000 completed, funds available. My legs gave out. I collapsed into Grandma's kitchen chair, the same one where she'd taught me to bake cookies as a child. $5 million, real, in my account, while my family ransacked her house for valuables. "Marissa?" You okay? Mom appeared in the doorway, concern briefly breaking through her practiced composure. I nodded, unable to speak, quickly locking my phone. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried until my body ached. For Grandma, for her loss, for the truth she'd tried to show me, for the family who couldn't see her worth until they thought she had money. And beneath the grief, a terrifying question formed. What would happen when they found out? I managed to keep my secret for exactly 9 days. The funeral was a performance of grief. Dad gave a eulogy about Mom's simple but meaningful life, voice-breaking at all the right moments. The twins posted black and white photos of Grandma on social media with captions about angels gaining wings. Meanwhile, I paid for everything: the casket, the flowers, the reception, without hesitation. That's what caught Mom's attention. After the service, as guests picked at finger sandwiches, she cornered me by the restrooms. "How did you afford all this?" she asked, eyes narrowing. The premium casket alone was $7,000. I considered lying, but was too exhausted for games. Grandma's check was real, Mom. Mine cleared. Her hand flew to her mouth. What? How much? All of it. $5 million. She stared at me, processing. Then, unexpectedly, she hugged me tight. I believed her, she whispered. I just didn't have the courage to say it. 2 days later, Dad called a family meeting. His tone made it clear this wasn't optional. I arrived to find everyone already seated in the living room. Dad, Mom, the twins, Uncle Craig, my cousins, all looking unusually serious. "Sit down." "Marissa," Dad commanded. I remained standing. "What's this about?" "Your mother tells me you've come into some money." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Open your banking app," Dad demanded, "and show us your balance." I clutched my phone tighter. "No." He lunged forward, trying to grab it. Mom stepped between us. "Greg, stop it!" "My check cleared," I said, the words falling like stones into silence. The room exploded. Harper screamed. Delaney knocked over a lamp. Uncle Craig started yelling about fraud. "That's impossible," Dad shouted, face reddening. "The bank wouldn't cash a fake check." "It wasn't fake," I said. "Then why only yours?" Delaney demanded, tears streaming. "Why not mine?" "Because you tore it up," I reminded her. "You all did. You laughed at her. You manipulated her," Harper accused, jabbing a finger at me. "You've always been her favorite." Dad's voice turned dangerously quiet. "What did you do, Marissa? What did you say to make her give you our money?" "Our money?" I repeated. "You thought it wasn't real. You mocked her for it." Mom's quiet voice cut through the chaos. "Check Grandma's will." 1 week after the funeral, we gathered at Mr. Kessler's law office downtown. The room screamed old money, leather chairs, mahogany desk, law books nobody ever opened. Just being there made my family sit straighter. Dad arrived in his best suit, confidence radiating from him like heat. He'd spent the week telling everyone that Grandma's real will would clarify everything, meaning my check must have been some bizarre mistake. "Mom always promised me her wedding ring," Harper whispered to Delaney, loud enough for me to hear. "I've already picked a spot for her antique mirror," Delaney replied. Uncle Craig discussed Grandma's house with Dad. "We should be able to flip it quickly. The market's hot right now." Mom sat beside me, separate from Dad for the first time I could remember at a family event. Mr. Kessler entered precisely at 10 a.m., carrying a single manila folder, no assistant, no boxes of documents, just one thin folder. "Good morning," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I'll keep this brief." Dad smiled confidently. "We appreciate your efficiency, Harold." Mr. Kessler didn't smile back. He opened the folder and began reading. I, Rosalind Eleanor Calder, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Standard legal language followed then. To my beloved granddaughter Marissa, the only one who ever saw me, not my money, not my age, not my flaws, I leave the remainder of my estate. That's it. No specific gifts, no itemized bequests, just everything to me. Dad jumped to his feet. That can't be it. What estate? She had nothing. Mr. Kessler's expression remained neutral. You are incorrect, Mr. Calder. Your mother was not poor. She inherited a significant investment portfolio 30 years ago and managed it quite successfully. She was worth approximately $48 million at the time of her death. The room went completely silent. Most of her wealth has already been distributed according to her instructions, Mr. Kessler continued. Dad's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Distributed to who? Mr. Kessler looked directly at me. Marissa. Chaos erupted. Dad shouted about elder abuse. The twins collapsed into each other, sobbing. Uncle Craig threatened lawsuits. Through it all, Mr. Kessler remained calm, waiting for the storm to pass. There's one more item, he said finally, withdrawing an envelope from the folder. For Marissa only. When I finally stood my ground, they called me heartless. But tell me, where were they when I was breaking? If you've ever had to choose peace over people, this channel is your space. Subscribe, not for me, but for every quiet soul who took their power back. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, my name written in Grandma's elegant script. The family still raged around me, but their voices faded as I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of Grandma's cream stationery, the kind she used for thank you notes and birthday cards. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. My dearest Marissa, it began. I read silently, tears blurring the words. If you're reading this, then everything happened as I planned. The checks were real, every one of them. Each person had the same opportunity. Equal chances at $5 million. I watched for years as this family changed. How money and status became more important than kindness. How visits became rare unless something was needed. How no one listened to an old woman anymore. Except you. You came when I was lonely. You remembered my birthday without reminders. You helped without being asked. You saw me, not what I could give you. The others, they revealed who they truly are. When faced with something that seemed impossible, they chose mockery over faith. They chose to believe the worst about me rather than consider I might be more than they assumed. Their reaction to the checks was their final test, and they failed. You passed, my darling girl, not because you deposited the check, but because you respected me enough to believe I wouldn't lie to you. Use this money wisely. Be generous. Be kind. But never forget what you learned at that Christmas table. The last paragraph hit me like a physical blow. I looked up, staring at my father, my sisters, my uncle, all still arguing about what they deserved. I read the final lines aloud, my voice cutting through their noise. To the rest of my family who mocked my gifts, you tore up opportunity because you could not see value beyond your own arrogance. I gave you all an equal chance. Marissa was the only one who believed in me. Therefore, she is the only one I trust with what I leave behind. My family went silent, truly silent, for the first time since Grandma died. Dad's face drained of color. The twins stared, open-mouthed. Uncle Craig sank into his chair. In that moment, I understood completely. The money was never just money. It was Grandma's final lesson about seeing people for who they are, not what they have. I pressed the letter to my heart, feeling her presence around me. She'd planned it all, the modest life, the secret fortune, the Christmas test, knowing exactly how everyone would react. Her final gift wasn't wealth, it was truth. The war started 3 days after the will reading. Dad filed his first lawsuit claiming I'd manipulated Grandma. His evidence? Photos of me visiting her suspiciously often in her final months. As if caring about someone was criminal. Harper and Delaney joined forces with Uncle Craig to claim Grandma wasn't mentally competent when she wrote the checks or updated her will. They hired experts to analyze her handwriting, her medical records, even her grocery lists from the past year. The family who had barely bothered to call Grandma suddenly became experts on her mental state. Meanwhile, my phone exploded with messages. "We can split it, just between us sisters." Harper, "Dad's just upset, but he loves you. We can work this out." Delaney, "Your grandmother would want the family to share." Uncle Craig, "When manipulation failed, the threats began. We'll drag this through every court for years. We'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Your reputation won't survive this." Mom was the only one who stood by me. She moved out of the house she'd shared with Dad for 30 years and into a small apartment downtown. "I enabled him for too long," she admitted one night over tea. "Watched him turn the girls into smaller versions of himself. I failed you both. You and Rosalind." The first court hearing was brutal. Dad's lawyer painted me as a calculating manipulator who isolated a vulnerable elderly woman from her family. They claimed I'd coached Grandma, convinced her the family didn't care, all to secure her fortune. The judge listened patiently, then asked a simple question. If Ms. Calder manipulated her grandmother into giving away millions, why did the deceased offer equal checks to everyone in the family? Dad's case crumbled in minutes. The judge dismissed it, with prejudice, legal speak for, "Don't waste my time again." But that didn't stop them. They filed new claims, hired different lawyers, contacted reporters with stories about the heartless granddaughter who stole their inheritance. I received hate mail from distant relatives I'd never even met. Through it all, I kept thinking about Grandma's letter, about seeing people for who they truly are. With every nasty comment, every false claim, my family showed me exactly who they were, and it had nothing to do with the person I thought I'd been raised by. 2 months after Grandma's funeral, Mr. Kessler called me. "I need to see you," he said. "There's one final item Rosalind instructed me to give you, but only after certain events transpired." I met him at his office the next morning. He handed me a small envelope sealed with red wax, bearing Grandma's initials pressed into it. "She was quite specific about the timing," he explained. "She said to give this to you only after your family had exhausted their legal options." I broke the seal carefully and removed a single note card. Just one line, written in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting. "Marissa, use the money wisely and kindly, but never forget. It wasn't the $5 million they laughed at. It was me. And that's why they lost everything." My breath caught. She was right. The family hadn't torn up checks because they thought the money wasn't real. They'd torn them up because they thought Grandma wasn't real. Not as a person whose words deserved respect or whose gifts warranted gratitude. They'd laughed at her, not the amount. Mr. Kessler cleared his throat. "Your grandmother asked me to tell you something else. She said, 'Tell Marissa that this was never about punishing the others. It was about protecting her.'" "Protecting me?" I asked, confused. "From them," he said simply. "She knew what wealth does to people who value it above all else. She'd seen it in her own life. She didn't want that for you." I remembered the Christmas dinner, the laughter, the mockery. I remembered Dad's dismissive tone, my sisters tearing up their checks, Uncle Craig joking about putting Grandma in a home. None of them had ever truly seen her. And now they'd never truly know me either. She also said that forgiveness is your choice, not your obligation, Mr. Kessler added. She was quite wise, your grandmother. I tucked the note into my pocket, feeling its weight against my heart. The money was just a tool, a mirror that reflected who people truly were when facing unexpected fortune. My family had looked into that mirror and revealed themselves completely. And in doing so, they'd freed me from ever wondering if I was the problem. Grandma's final gift wasn't the millions, it was the truth. The first thing I did with Grandma's money wasn't buy a mansion or a sports car. I bought her house. The family had already started fighting over who would get to sell it. Dad had even brought a real estate photographer by without telling anyone. So I made an offer through Mr. Kessler's office, paying well above market value to ensure no one could object. Then I restored it, piece by piece. I kept her furniture, but had it professionally cleaned. Repainted the walls in her favorite soft yellow. Replaced the worn carpet with hardwood that matched the original floors. Fixed the creaky stairs she'd navigated so carefully in her final years. Not to sell it, to keep it, to honor it. With Mr. Kessler's guidance, I established the Marissa Calder Foundation, focusing on 3 causes Grandma cared about: literacy programs for children, support for elderly people living alone, and interest-free loans for nursing students. Money should help people, she'd always said. Now hers would. I didn't hide the money, but I didn't flaunt it either. I quit my dead-end job and went back to school to finish the degree I'd abandoned years ago when tuition became too expensive. I bought a comfortable but modest home near campus. I drove a reliable car, not a flashy one. The biggest change wasn't external, but internal. For the first time, I stopped seeking approval from people who couldn't give it, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. Mom and I grew closer than we'd ever been. She filed for divorce after 32 years of marriage, saying Grandma's courage had given her strength to finally leave. I watched Rosalind live authentically all these years. She told me over coffee in Grandma's, now my kitchen. I just needed to find my own courage. The hardest lesson was learning who to trust. Suddenly, distant relatives remembered my birthday. Old classmates wanted to reconnect. Men who'd never noticed me before sent flowers. But I remembered Grandma's words about how people reveal themselves when they think there's something to gain. And I watched carefully. While I rebuilt my life, my family's perfect facade crumbled. Dad's business partners started distancing themselves after his courtroom outbursts made local news. Clients questioned his judgment. Banks became hesitant to finance his projects. His reputation as a level-headed businessman dissolved into whispers about a man who'd sue his own daughter. The twins found that Instagram followers don't pay bills. Their lavish lifestyles, maintained by Dad's money and expectations of Grandma's inheritance, became unsustainable. Harper lost her downtown apartment. Delaney had to sell her designer bags. Uncle Craig's gambling problem, long hidden beneath a veneer of success, caught up with him without the expected inheritance to bail him out. Their fall wasn't sudden but gradual, a slow descent fueled by their own choices and character. 1 year after Grandma's death, Dad called me. "Marissa," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence, "we should talk." We met at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, tired around the eyes, his expensive watch replaced by something simpler. "I've been thinking," he began, stirring his coffee endlessly. "Maybe we could put this behind us. Family should stick together." I waited, knowing there was more. "Your business degree is almost finished. I could use someone with fresh ideas in the company. We could be partners eventually." And there it was. Not an apology. Not recognition of how he'd treated Grandma or me. Just another attempt to access what I had. That's a generous offer, I said carefully, but I'm establishing my own path. His expression hardened. This money has changed you. No, I corrected gently. It revealed all of us. The twins tried next, inviting me to lunch at an expensive restaurant they could no longer afford. They talked about sister trips, family healing, sharing resources like sisters should. Not once did they mention Grandma by name. Mom warned me later. They're not sorry for what they did. They're sorry for what they lost. I didn't gloat over their struggles, didn't rub my success in their faces. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simply living well while letting natural consequences unfold around me. 5 years have passed since that Christmas dinner. I still visit Grandma's grave every month, bringing her favorite yellow roses and sitting on the small bench I installed beside her headstone. Today marks the anniversary of her passing. The winter air bites at my cheeks as I brush snow from her granite marker. "Hey, Grandma," I whisper, placing fresh flowers in the bronze vase. "I graduated last week, top of my class, just like you always said I could be." The scholarship fund in her name has helped 50 nursing students so far. The literacy program reaches thousands of children. The Elderly Support Network provides companionship to hundreds of seniors who would otherwise be alone. Her money changed lives, just not in the way my family had expected. Dad's business eventually recovered, though never to its former glory. The twins found more sustainable lifestyles after reality forced their adjustment. Uncle Craig joined a gambling addiction program after hitting rock bottom. Mom found happiness in her independence, teaching art classes and dating a kind man who listens when she speaks. We're not a family anymore, not in the traditional sense. But we're all exactly where our choices led us. I run my fingers over Grandma's name on the cold stone. The foundation approved 10 new nursing scholarships yesterday, I tell her, and we're opening the 3rd reading center next month. A light snow begins to fall, dusting my hair and coat with tiny crystals. I've thought often about Grandma's final test. It wasn't about the money at all. It was about character, about how we treat people when we think they have nothing to offer us. The greatest wealth isn't what's in your bank account. It's recognizing the value in others when no one else does. It's believing people when they show you who they are, both the good and the bad. Grandma didn't just leave me millions. She left me discernment, the ability to see truth beneath surface, the courage to walk away from toxicity, even when it wears the mask of family, and in the end, that's worth more than any inheritance. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback, it's about peace. And if this story touched you, subscribe right now. Because somewhere, someone is watching in silence, wondering if they're wrong for choosing their own worth over family approval. Your one click might help them find the courage they need. After all, the greatest revenge is living well on your own terms.